Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. We've got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Alrighty, people, welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Marcus Vargas, and first and foremost, guys, I just want to say I hope you all are doing well. I know, recently a lot of states and cities and towns have sort of began to ease up or the vibe or the notion behind, social distancing and the attitude towards, all these restrictions is starting to ease up. But that doesn't mean we should stop being careful and stop being safe. Definitely act as if, that when we first started quarantining and not total panic, but definitely act as if everyone out there has the coronavirus and you don't want to catch it. With that, though, guys, I do want to say today is mock draft mania, basically, on today's show. We're going to be talking a lot of fantasy football, some mock drafts, and we're going to talk a lot about ESPN's live fantasy football draft trends. I'm not sure how many of you do ESPN fantasy football or NFL fantasy football. I personally prefer ESPN fantasy football, but this sort of content will carry over even if it's ESPN, because this is just how people are drafting at the moment. I'm not sure using a different app is going to change how you're drafting. You know what I mean? So this live draft trend site basically just tracks where these players are being drafted in a bunch of mock drafts. So, and they do it by snake draft, auction draft, etc. I'm going to be looking at the snake draft positioning because, auction draft is a bit different. It has to do with money and valuing the player based on a certain budget. So this will keep it more simple and more universal for everyone to understand. So basically what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to go down this list quite far, actually, because we'll go player by player, let you know if I agree with this, let you know about any surprises, where you should be taking these guys, or where I think you should be taking these guys, where I would take these guys, etc., etc. So with that, I think we can just get right into it, guys. Of course, it's pretty clear, the overall consensus, between, regular football fans, casual fantasy football players, and experts, they all agree that Christian McCaffrey should be the first off of the board. I have, no qualms with that. That's fine. Has him here as average. He's on average the number one pick in fantasy football drafts. Now, this next one here is pretty interesting. At number 2, Michael Thomas. Now, it's justified. I personally would not take Michael Thomas here because, I'm a guy who, as of recent, has been bigger on running backs, and I understand Michael Thomas had an outrageous season last year. He scored so many fantasy football points at the wide receiver position, broke records, crazy yardage total, but I don't think he's going to repeat that. Of course, it's going to be very, very hard to repeat that, break his own record, have that many yards, and score that many fantasy football points, especially with people knowing, Drew Brees is on his last ride, and I know Michael Thomas, it doesn't matter. If teams double cover him, he's gonna find a way to get open, but I just don't see him repeating as much success. And I see a guy like Saquon, trying to have a bounce back year, scoring more points than Michael Thomas when it's all said and done. So I would take Saquon there, number 2. No problem, honestly, with Michael Thomas there. If you're gonna go wide receiver first, that's totally fine. He should definitely be the first wide receiver off of the board. So at 3, Saquon Barkley. That's fine with me. Again, I might take him second, but they have him here at 3. At number 4, Ezekiel Elliott of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I like Zeke here at the number 4 pick. I do have concerns, losing Travis Frederick. Last year, people say he had a down year last year, but we have to remember, guys, he had over 1,300 yards. He was a top 5 fantasy football running back. I think he did just fine. Just because he wasn't, rushing for 1,700 yards, 1,500 yards with 10 touchdowns doesn't mean, he was a bad back by any means. If you had him in fantasy football, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Number 5, Dalvin Cook. They have Dalvin Cook's average pick as number 6 here, which is actually very surprising. He's on average. So just to clarify, so the on average pick is a bit different. So so technically, Saquon Barkley's average pick was 3.7. Zeke's was 4.5. Dalvin Cook's is 6.1, even though he's the 5th player taken here on average. That's just, numbers. In some drafts, these guys are going to go higher or lower, so it's going to skew the average pick number. But he's going to be the 5th player selected. But on average, he might go as the 6th pick. So it's the 6th pick, but it's by average terms, it's 5th. You know what I mean? So 1.5. 1.2 is 1, 3.0 is 2, 3.7 is 3, 4.5 is 4, and 6.1 is 5. So it's a little bit confusing, but just know that he's on average the 5th selected person. I know I made that way more confusing than it had to be. Okay, I'm fine with that pick. Dalvin Cook was an absolute monster last season. 5 is great for him. And, if Christian McCaffrey and Michael Thomas weren't absolute monsters, he might be a top 3 pick. Alvin Kamara, number 6. Definitely like that. Pass-catching guy. You know how I love these pass-catching running backs, especially if you're playing PPR. Pass-catching running backs are just gold mines. I think Alvin Kamara is going to have a huge bounce-back year next season. I actually might take him over a guy like Dalvin Cook. I think, he said himself, he was basically playing on 75% on one leg, and now he's finally coming back 100%. So, hey, if you believe that, and if that's, if we're going to run with that as why he had a down year, I'll definitely take him at 6 here. That's a steal there for number 6 if Alvin Kamara returns to form. Oh yeah, give me that all day. At number 7, DeAndre Hopkins, the second wide receiver, comes off the board. I like this pick here. I definitely like DeAndre Hopkins to be the second receiver off the board behind Michael Thomas. I understand, why some guys will advocate for Julio, but I think DeAndre here, definitely a solid pick. It doesn't matter that he's going to be in Arizona. He's an amazing wide receiver. He's going to put up a ton of points. At number 8, this is actually sort of a surprise for me on average, Davante Adams. That's the next person off the board, another wide receiver. I'm not sure I like this pick here. I think I'd take a guy like Julio Jones over Davante Adams. That's just me. I understand, Davante Adams is an amazing receiver, but I just think, he did have some health concerns last year, and I think it's sort of, at this point, I don't know what's going on with Aaron Rodgers. I don't know, how much drama there's going to be, how much diva there's going to be, because I know with that going on, it's only going to negatively affect the offense. So I'm not quite sure if I would take Davante Adams over a guy like Julio Jones. Now, next guy to be taken off the board here, Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry at number 9 as a first round sort of selection. I'm not sure about this one only because, I have my trepidations with a guy who's not catching the ball, but Derrick Henry was an absolute beast. I don't think, he leads the league in rushing again because teams are going to understand that the Titans are one-dimensional and they're going to have to stop this guy. I know, some guys are just unstoppable, but I think he's going to take a significant dip this year. But, it's fine. I don't mind this pick here. I don't know who I would take. I would take I wouldn't take any running back at that point there. So Derrick Henry, he's a stud. I don't mind the pick there. Now, right here, Julio Jones at number 10. I'd flip-flop him and Davante. I think Julio deserves to be picked over Davante Adams. But, if you're a guy getting Davante Adams at number 10 in your draft, you're going to be happy. Definitely going to take that. Now, here is where I'm surprised, right? Because I play in a lot of 10-man leagues. I don't really like 12. I think 12 is just a bit too much for fantasy football leagues. I think 10 is a good number. And so technically, right, if we're doing this in a 10-man, Lamar Jackson is selected with the first pick in the second round. Lamar Jackson here is number 11. Huge surprise, but not that surprising at the same time. Everyone is going to be super, super up and high on Lamar Jackson, and my advice to everyone would be to take advantage of that. If you're not a guy, if you're not a Ravens fan, or if you're not going to take Lamar Jackson, that early, be prepared for someone to do it, because someone is going to do it. I can guarantee in almost every draft, someone's going to take Lamar Jackson super, super early, so you need to capitalize on someone, that guy left on the board, a running back or a top receiver that's still going to be available here. For example, that next pick right after Lamar Jackson on average is Tyreek Hill. Definitely a good spot for Tyreek Hill here. He's an underappreciated top flight receiver. Definitely a guy, nobody talks about Tyreek Hill when you talk about best receivers in the league, but honestly, he needs to be considered one of the best receivers in the league. He's not just a fast guy. He can run routes. He can jump, moss people. He's a very athletic, explosive receiver, can make juke moves. He's kind of the full package. Of course, he's not huge and he's not, super, super physical, but I think, for his style, he does it so well that he should be regarded as one of the league's top wide receivers. He's not just benefiting from Patrick Mahomes. He was excelling with Alex Smith before Patrick Mahomes got there. Patrick Mahomes, of course, turned the dial up a bunch. But Tyreek Hill, solid pick here. If I get Tyreek Hill, pick number 12, Tyreek Hill there, it's great value. Definitely love that. I think he's going to have a big year. At 13, Chris Godwin. I don't mind that pick there. I like him being picked before Mike Evans, though. I will say that. I think he's going to be the top receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm not sure how Mike Evans will fare. Of course, we'll have to see, but I like that pick there, Chris Godwin. Now, this will be our last pick before we take a break, and it's an interesting one. Kansas City's quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, goes 14th, only 2 picks after Lamar Jackson. Now, you're going to be seeing this a lot, guys. If someone takes Lamar Jackson, someone else might just see that and sort of panic or say, oh, crap, I missed out on Lamar. I got to take Pat Mahomes. So be prepared for that. My advice would be go into the draft expecting Lamar or Patrick Mahomes to be selected in the second round, or maybe even someone goes crazy and selects Lamar in the first round. I would not be surprised if that happens, guys. I was in several drafts last season where someone took Patrick Mahomes either very early in the second round or even in the first round with their first pick. So definitely keep an eye on where these two are going to go. I would not draft them this early. Definitely would not. I would, if Patrick Mahomes, I might take him in the third round. Just because of the sheer numbers he's going to put up. It's a ton of value, and I know that he's not going to last past the third round, so that's maybe where I would take him. I'm not sure I'm taking him, with my second pick here in the second round, but, that seems to be what people are doing, so it's going to be a very, very interesting year, especially for quarterbacks. So with that, guys, we're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we're going to continue going down this list here. I'll let you know what I think, and of course, the surprises, because there's definitely one I see already coming up. So enjoy the break, guys. We'll be right back.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco, ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, guys. And here we continue we'll call it mock draft mania. It's not a mock draft, but we're analyzing, mock draft trends. So we'll stick with it. I like it, mock draft mania. All right. At 15th, we just ended with the 14th pick. That was Patrick Mahomes on average. That's the live trends right now. With the 15th pick, people on average are selecting Aaron Jones, running back for Green Bay. This one here, I do not agree with. There are several backs that I think I would take over Aaron Jones at this point in time, especially because, Jamal Williams is a threat. They also drafted a running back. I believe it was in the second round. So I'm not sure how much they believe in Aaron Jones at this point in time. I know he had a ton of touchdowns last season, but I don't think that that's sustainable. It seems very, very unlikely that he repeats that. So I'm not sure that Aaron Jones here is the right selection, but if you did pick him, I would understand why. He had a ton of touchdowns last year, and that's big for fantasy football. I think he had 16 touchdowns. He might have led the league in rushing touchdowns. It was pretty absurd. Now, this next pick here, no problems with it at all. I'm actually surprised maybe he wasn't picked earlier. Travis Kelce, number 16, going in the second round. Definitely deserves to be the top tight end off the board. This pick right here I have no problem with. He's going to score you a ton of fantasy football points, and he's most likely going to be the top scorer at the tight end position. Last year he scored 250 plus points at the tight end position. So expect him to get similar numbers just because, Patrick Mahomes is still the quarterback on that team. So definitely expect Travis Kelce to do more of the same. Now next here we have Tampa Bay's other receiver, Mike Evans. The only reason I don't like this pick here is because of the guy who's going to come right after. So I'm going to skip Mike Evans here, guys. Austin Eckler is the number 18th pick on average. That is an absolute steal. Guys, if you told me that Austin Eckler would be the 18th guy off the board, I wouldn't believe you. I think a lot of people are sleeping on this guy. On average, his average draft position is actually 19.9. So, if he's slipping that far, guys, definitely swipe him up. I think this is going to be one of the top steals of the draft. Austin Eckler last year, I don't know if you guys remember, through the first couple of weeks without Melvin Gordon was the top fantasy football running back. And it was pretty insane. With Melvin Gordon still rejoining the team, the man averaged to still score 309 fantasy football points. That's pretty absurd. ESPN has him projected to score 242.5. I think that's way off. I think that's way too low. I think, with Austin Eckler, I know people are concerned about Justin Jackson and there might be a committee. I mean, there were games where Austin Eckler barely had any rush attempts, but he's catching 10 balls out of the backfield. So now, you add that, you add just 10 more rushing attempts to that at minimum, right? Because he's going to be the top guy. They gave him the extension. Of course, it's not some mega deal, but they believe in him. They gave him the extension with the guarantees, all that. He's going to be the guy that I think they're going to rely on a lot. Again, they have Tyrod Taylor, not a guy who's going to be pushing the ball down the field. I expect a lot of checkdowns to the running back. I expect a lot of short passes. I think this is heaven for Austin Eckler. This is just people sleeping on him that much. Take advantage of that and keep an eye on Austin Eckler, guys. If he's available here in the second round and you didn't get, say you went with a receiver in the first round, Austin Eckler is for sure a great choice for your RB1. I think he's very, very undervalued here. Now, next, we have Nick Chubb at number 19. Again, solid pick. I think, a lot of people slept on Nick Chubb because, he was on the Cleveland Browns, but he had 1,494 yards with a 5-yard per carry average. Of course, he didn't have the huge, he's not big in the receiving game. And so that's why, there's a bit of a problem there with his fantasy football points. But, he still was a very, very solid fantasy football running back for most of the season. He fell off late in the season, several reasons for that, you know what I mean? The team really didn't have an identity, didn't know what they wanted to do, but he stayed constant, and I think he outperforms this draft position as well. I don't think this is as much of a steal as Austin Eckler, but 19 with the average draft position of 21 for Nick Chubb is definitely great. I really like that there. If you can get him at that position, that's going to be very, very good for your fantasy football team. At 20, George Kittle, San Francisco 49ers. No problem with that. Honestly, I have no problems with guys overvaluing tight ends because the tight end position is so scarce. I mean, I would have a problem if you're getting a guy, a random guy. Maybe if you're taking Hayden Hurst this early. Not that he's random, but, a guy who's clearly not in the ranks of George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, things like that. The elite tight ends are going to go early. That's pretty much how it always goes. Usually Travis Kelce first, maybe Zach Ertz second, maybe George Kittle second, but you're going to see these guys going in the second and third round for sure. Okay, after George Kittle, I like Kenyon Drake there. Kenyon Drake at 21. That's fine here. He's over guys like Josh Jacobs and Joe Mixon. I agree with that. Leonard Fournette at 24. So it was Kenyon Drake, Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, Leonard Fournette. 4 running backs right there in a row. See, now recently, it's hard. It's hard to know how to feel about Leonard Fournette. This is very low for him, though. Leonard Fournette was a top 10 fantasy football running back here, and I'm pretty sure. Let's see. How many running backs went before him? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 went before him. So he's drafted as a running back 12. I don't agree with that. I think he's going to outperform those other guys. They have him projected scoring less than them, but I don't know how I feel, about Joe Mixon over him, about even Josh Jacobs. Even though he was a stud, I'm not sure I'm taking those two guys over Leonard Fournette. I know he's had drama recently, but if Leonard Fournette slipping this low, over behind guys like Josh Jacobs and Joe Mixon, definitely scoop him up. And of course, like I do want to say, guys, this is going to be different than your drafts, right? Like just because this is just the average draft, well, you might be in one of those non-average drafts where Austin Eckler gets swiped up much earlier. Of course, you're going to have to realize that who you're drafting with for sure affects where these guys go. That's one thing about the beauty of drafting. It's different for absolutely everyone. Every draft is different. Everyone has their justifications for taking guys where they take them. So basically, I would say use this as a guide, but this is not an end-all, be-all on where people should be drafted or why why you should be picking them where they are. You might have, let's say, a diehard Ravens fan, a diehard Chargers fan. The diehard Ravens fan is going to make the crazy decision to take Lamar Jackson with the 3rd overall pick. and that affects how you're going to be drafting. So definitely know who you're drafting with. That's going to be a big factor in how you draft. I've been in drafts, where everybody's selecting pretty, normally, good value. Some people take reaching, but it's whatever. And then I've also been in drafts where you see Ronald Jones selected in the beginning of the second round. Yes, Ronald Jones, the running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, every draft has its own quirks to it, and different people do different crazy things. So you're going to want to study, basically, if you can. If you've been in a draft with people, for several years, definitely try and remember how they usually draft, because that'll affect, who's on the board when and how you can draft around them. So with that, we're going to go into a short break, and then we're going to continue here talking more about this live draft trends. And then after that, guys, I want to talk about a mock draft I recently did, just to give some sort of perspective on how things, people have been drafting. So with that, guys, we're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we'll continue with this stuff, and of course, we'll get into more. So stay tuned, guys, and enjoy the short break.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Alrighty, people, welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Okay, guys, mock draft mania continues here at pick number 25. We just got done talking about Leonard Fournette, who was pick 24. Pick 25 here, guys, to me is a big surprise. If this guy ends up here after certain other receivers, and you're definitely going to want to scoop him up. This is going to be a huge steal. Kenny Golladay, number 25. Guys, if he, I would take him over Mike Evans, who was picked about, 8 slots before him? Yes. 8 slots before Kenny Golladay was selected, Mike Evans on average is selected. Never mind the fact that Kenny Golladay was a top 10 fantasy football wide receiver last season with who at quarterback? Exactly. Kenny Golladay succeeded. I'm pretty sure he scored more fantasy points than Mike Evans with very subpar quarterback play. Matthew Stafford was injured all season. Getting Matthew Stafford back is going to be a huge boost. DeAndre Swift in that run game, helping that offense, spreading it out. It's going to be a huge boost. Kenny Golladay here is a steal for sure. This is going to be a great pick for you if he's at 25th overall. I think he should be going much earlier over a guy like Mike Evans. Now, Adam Thielen here, next, 26, no problem with that. Adam Thielen's a reliable guy, going to be great for PPR. Might be even better now that Justin Jefferson's in the mix since Stephon Diggs is not. As Justin Jefferson comes into his own, Adam Thielen's going to have a ton of targets. This one here, I'm questioning. Todd Gurley. And I'm questioning this because, later down the line, guys like Miles Sanders still have not been picked. And I'm not sure that I trust Todd Gurley at the moment. Of course, we have to see what happens during the season. His health concerns are very, very concerning. The knees as a running back, he's only getting older. It's only going to get worse at this point. And a guy like Miles Sanders, they actually scored around the same amount of points total last season. So I think Miles Sanders has a bit more upside than Todd Gurley just because I'm not worried about him, having limited touches, limited snaps, and or getting hurt. I could see this is a risky pick here. I'm not going to say, you shouldn't do this at all. Risky pick, has a lot of upside, but of course, just a couple years ago, Todd Gurley was in the top 3 picks. You know what I mean? We were saying maybe he should be picked number 1 overall. So to see him fall this far, because of the health concerns and the snap counts, is disappointing. But if he, can return to form and he's healthy, that's going to be, one of the biggest steals of the draft there. Now, Amari Cooper comes after here on average 28. On average, being selected 28th in the draft. He was a top 10 receiver, and I think right here he would be the 10th receiver selected. Let me just count this. Sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, that's a fair spot for him. Of course, with CeeDee Lamb coming in, touches might be spread a bit more, so you have to sort of tamper your expectations. He did very, very well last season. If he'd have been the same Amari Cooper on the road as he was at home, he'd been ranked much higher, but that was his biggest problem. Now, honestly, like I always say, I'm a Dallas hater as much as, the next guy, but I expect that to improve. I don't expect Amari Cooper can, after being paid how much he's being paid, that the Cowboys are going to accept him coming into the next season doing the same thing, basically quitting, giving up, not showing up on the road. He needs to fix that part of his game, whatever, mental state that he gets in when on the road for some reason. I mean, and I know, like in that Patriots game, you're facing Stephon Gilmore, lockdown corner, he's probably going to get the best of you, but it happened too many times last season that on the road, Amari Cooper didn't show up, didn't perform well. So he's going to have to improve that, and I think he does, so he might outperform this position here. Next, we have DJ Moore. No problems there. I think, he's the top receiver in Carolina. I'm just concerned about Teddy Bridgewater. Like, I know Teddy Bridgewater is a solid guy. He's not going to turn the ball over, but I'm just, I get concerned, as being a guy, a fan of a team that had Alex Smith, You understand why I'm a bit, reluctant here. So, with the next pick, Zach Ertz is the 3rd tight end off the board. Perfect there for him. I think he should be the 3rd tight end off the board. I think Travis Kelce 1, George Kittle 2. I could understand why you might take George Kittle 1, even though Travis Kelce I think is the clear number 1. But Zach Ertz 3rd tight end off the board. No problems with that here. That's with the 30th selection. So, Keenan Allen next. Keenan Allen, I think, is being really undervalued because Tyrod Taylor is going to be the quarterback. I think Keenan Allen's always been a guy who's been pretty slept on. He's not a guy a lot of people talk about. Maybe it's because he's been, with Phillip Rivers, but he was top 6. He was number 6 position ranked number 6 fantasy football last season, guys. So, I figured he was a top 10 kind of guy. You guys need to be paying attention to Keenan Allen. He's being undervalued here, and I think he outperforms that. Even with Tyrod Taylor, he's a great receiver, and people are definitely sleeping on him. After him comes Juju Smith-Schuster. I like that pick here. He's going to perform better than he did last year, guys. Take advantage of everyone sleeping on him because of the horrible year he had last year for fantasy football and just kind of in general. Of course, he was hampered by injuries, missed a ton of games, subpar quarterback play. But Juju Smith-Schuster is a good receiver, solid receiver. And, of course, he didn't get a fair shake when it comes, a lot of people were like, oh, we want to see what he's like without Antonio Brown and this, that, and the third. But he didn't have Big Ben either. And we have to remember, Antonio Brown benefited from having Le'Veon Bell on that team, Big Ben, and a great offensive line. So, everyone has help. Nobody in football performs in a vacuum. So you do have to remember that. Juju gets Big Ben back, and hopefully he comes back healthy, and we'll get to see his true potential. I think he outperforms this position as well. Next, we have Miles Sanders. Of course, like I said, I probably would take him over a guy like Todd Gurley. I trust Miles Sanders a bit more. I know he's going to be sharing roles, maybe sharing touches maybe with Boston Scott, but I think Miles Sanders will soon make himself, the clear-cut number 1 in Philly. I think he has a lot of potential. He was a beast late in the season last year, so I expect him to continue kind of where he left off. Here at 34th, Allen Robinson. Now, as I'll get into my mock draft, I actually ended up with Allen Robinson. And guys, Allen Robinson, yes, he's on the Bears. Yes, Mitchell Trubisky is his quarterback. But he's basically the only receiver they have. And he was a top 10 fantasy football wide receiver. So definitely keep your eyes on Allen Robinson. He's a talented guy just on a bad team. But he's going to put up fantasy football points. So pay attention to him. Next, 4th tight end off the board, Mark Andrews. I agree with that. I'm not sure he's going to be, as prolific as he was last season. It was pretty insane. But I agree with that here. No problems with that. Odell Beckham Jr. Are you willing to take the risk on him? I think you should. I think, average draft position 41.8. That's when he's average picked. I'll take that. I'll take that for Odell Beckham Jr. I understand, he had the horrible down year, but I think he's going to come back, get back to form, be healthy, and sort of put up those numbers that we're expected to see from Odell. Now, the next pick is Courtland Sutton, but I have no problems with that. I want to skip over to that pick. On average, at 43rd, he's ranked 38th here. On average, he's picked with pick number 43, Deshaun Watson. Of the Houston Texans. Now this, I fully expect him to be the third QB off the board in almost all fantasy football drafts. Getting him in the 4th or 5th round is a steal, so I like this pick here. I definitely like Deshaun Watson going in the 4th round. It makes it so that you have a mobile, prolific, playmaking quarterback, but you didn't have to waste a top 2 rounds, top 2 round picks on him. So very, very good pick here. If you don't end up with Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson or Kyler Murray in the later rounds as your starting fantasy football quarterback, you won't be disappointed. Really like this pick here. But with that, guys, we'll go into break again, and after the break, we're gonna wrap up with my last 10 picks here. And I'll analyze those, and then we'll talk some mock draft and some other news. So with that, guys, we'll take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Alrighty, guys, welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We're just going to finish up here, wrapping up the top 50 in the average draft position on the ESPN Live Fantasy Football Draft Trends website. We just finished talking about Deshaun Watson being the third QB to go off the board, how much I like that, and how you can actually wait on a quarterback if you don't get Lamar or Patrick Mahomes. Now, I have no problems with the next pick, Tyler Lockett, right after him at 39, ranked at 39. Ranked at 40, Le'Veon Bell. I think this could be an extreme steal, guys. I liked that the Jets picked up an offensive lineman, Mekhi Becton, in the 2020 NFL Draft. Although PFF didn't have him, they didn't rank him higher than some other guys, and we're kind of low on him. The fact that they're making an effort to shore up their line is good, because Le'Veon Bell basically was he was trying to be a one-man show, and teams were just not letting that happen. He was running behind poor blocking. He was basically the biggest weapon on the team, even though he wasn't very efficient. He was the biggest name, biggest threat on the team if he ever got going. So they made sure to shut him down almost every game. He severely underperformed, and I think him being, taken in a fourth round, that's going to be, it's going to have a lot of upside, because, we know what Le'Veon Bell can do. When he was on the Pittsburgh Steelers, he was arguably the best running back in the league. But I guess he's learned his lesson, because it goes to show him you need an offensive line, my man. It's not just all about you. So hopefully he has a bounce-back year. I'm predicting him to have a bounce-back year. I think if you get him here, this is great pick. I think he'll have a lot of upside if he can bounce back. That's going to be well worth that pick that late. Darren Waller comes in after him at 41. I like him to be the next tight end selected off the board. No problem with that. David Johnson here at 42. It's a risk, but if you're picking him down here, he's going to be your RB2, maybe even your flex at that point. So no problems with that, because I think they figure to use him a lot in their offense. They made the big trade for him. They better use him, or it's going to look even stupider. So David Johnson here, not too bad. Cooper Kupp here at 43, I think is actually low for him. I think he was doing very well last season, and while I've expressed my discontent with Jared Goff, I think Cooper Kupp is a very solid receiver. I think he has a lot of potential. He scored 270 fantasy football points, position rank number 4. So to have him all the way down here is almost disrespectful. I think Cooper Kupp should be, I don't think he's going to finish, that high again. But I think, you got to rank him a bit higher than this. Take him earlier than this for sure. If he's still there that late, oh my gosh, scoop him up. This next pick is completely a surprise. When you look at it at face value, not too much of a surprise when you realize tight ends are so scarce. But Rob Gronkowski here at 44, being drafted within the first 4 rounds. That's pretty insane. I'm not sure I would take Rob Gronkowski here. There's a lot we have to see. Rob Gronkowski in his last season before he retired dealt with a ton of injuries, and was a fantasy disappointment. But I mean, he does have some value with Tom Brady. The chemistry, I've talked about it. He's definitely going to be a solid tight end should he stay healthy. But he has a lot of injury concerns, so you're going to have to be dealing with that. A pick here, I think that early is going to be a bit risky. I think a lot of guys aren't going to take Rob Gronkowski this early, but again, you got to know who you're drafting with. Next 2 picks here, Chris Carson and Russell Wilson. I like that. However, right after Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray is selected, and I think Kyler Murray is going to be worth more than Russell Wilson. I think you could even, if you wanted to, if Deshaun Watson was available, I wouldn't argue with you if you took Kyler Murray over Deshaun Watson. I wouldn't. I understand that right now Deshaun Watson is the better quarterback, but like I said, I expect Kyler Murray to take a leap in his second year. I think he's going to be great. Never mind the fact that he has Deshaun Watson's biggest weapon now, and Deshaun Watson just lost a stud. It would make a lot of sense to see Kyler Murray actually go before Deshaun Watson. However, just to touch back on Deshaun Watson, a lot of people, have been talking about the fact that Deshaun Watson might be, some experts have agreed that he might be running the ball a bit more. You know, he might have to put the team on his back and be more mobile. So without the receiving threats, we might see Deshaun Watson take off much more with his legs and score some touchdowns on the ground, which of course is big for fantasy football value. Russell Wilson here, I mean, reliable. Reliable, definitely reliable. If you took him over Kyler Murray, I wouldn't be too upset about it. I think Kyler Murray right now has a chance to be a top fantasy football quarterback and could explode onto the scene. He was Rookie of the Year last year. We have to remember that. But Russell Wilson is definitely a fine option. Of course, he had some disappointing games last season. But he finished as a top 3 fantasy football quarterback. So, you know, you're going to take that because I sure am. I know he had, like I said, he had a lot of low scoring games in the beginning of the season, but he picked that up towards the end of the season. He was a monster, mobile guy, always improvising, always seeming to make, magic out of nothing. I mean, you remember that throw in the back of the end zone to Tyler Lockett. Man, everybody thought he was throwing it out, but I think, that was planned because, Russell Wilson's got that magic. So, Russell Wilson there, fine. Kyler Murray right after him, no problems with that. But you can flip-flop those two as well. At 48, 49, and 50, we have Robert Woods, T.Y. Hilton, and Dak Prescott, respectively. Now, T.Y. Hilton is going to be taken late in a lot of leagues. He had a pretty disappointing season last year that was sort of marred by injury, but I think T.Y. Hilton's being severely undervalued. I think with Phillip Rivers coming in, hopefully he's more healthy this year. He's definitely going to perform much better than last season and have a bounce-back year. Last year, he only scored 125 fantasy points, so that's really, really hard not to beat. If he does any worse, if he does worse than that, I think, his spot on the Colts comes into question. He only had 45 catches for 501 yards and 5 TDs. So, you hope to see him get back into the 1,000-yard range, back into the, 6 to 8 touchdowns. And I know he's capable of doing so. Hopefully with Phillip Rivers coming in, new quarterback, I think that'll definitely help him because I think Phillip Rivers is a better quarterback than Jacoby Brissett. Even though Phillip Rivers is going to turn the ball over, I'd much rather have Phillip Rivers in the pocket. And Phillip Rivers can launch it. So I see T.Y. Hilton catching a lot of deep balls, having a lot of big touchdowns next season, and definitely outperforming this spot here. Now, number 50. Got to talk about the man, Dak Prescott. Now, if you look at his last season, in which he was the number 2 fantasy football quarterback, this ranking is very, very low. It's also kind of hard to understand because, the team didn't get much worse. They got quite a bit better on offense with the addition of CeeDee Lamb. Yes, they lost Randall Cobb, who I think almost 1,000 yards. He had 800 some yards last season. But I think CeeDee Lamb right now, a lot of teams would rather have CeeDee Lamb over Randall Cobb. They believe CeeDee Lamb has much more potential to be a big star receiver. So I think that this ranking is extremely low. I understand, the sort of the criticisms on Dak Prescott and how, they were behind a lot, so that's why he was throwing a ton. But I don't know that Dak Prescott should be taken this late in the draft or behind all of those other quarterbacks. I mean, it's hard to say, though, because, it's hard for me to put Dak Prescott above Russell Wilson, above Kyler Murray at this point, but he's shown that he can do it. The only reason I would, put Kyler Murray above him is because, the mobility. I think, Kyler Murray's going to run the ball much more. But Dak Prescott has shown, guys, that he can be a reliable fantasy football quarterback. Still has Amari Cooper. Still has Michael Gallup. Adding CeeDee Lamb to the mix. Still has Ezekiel Elliott. Still has Tony Pollard, and I know Zeke is not the biggest pass-catching running back, but he catches passes out of the backfield as well. So that's value for Dak as well. And I think, and Dak has some mobility too. He's not just a guy who sits in the pocket. He can run it when he has to. I'm pretty sure he had 3 rushing touchdowns last season. So I don't agree with this ranking. I understand why he's picked after all these other guys, but this is extremely low for him, I think. And I think, if you picked him over someone like Kyler Murray because, you trust him more, he's shown that he can do it, I wouldn't argue there. So that's the top 50, guys. I hope you enjoyed us going through this. I know it was a bit long, but I think you'll find it very, very interesting. I encourage you guys to go look at this. It's ESPN's Fantasy Football Live Draft Trends. You can just type that into Google, and it should be the first thing that pops up. Very, very interesting. And they update these with weekly, some guys go up and down, and they do a, 7-day plus or minus so that you know, what are people tending to do. It might help you figure out, a better draft strategy and what you guys want to do. Of course, if you do an auction draft, it's going to be a bit different, but this is for guys who are doing snake drafts. That's the one I do. I like that a lot. But it's definitely a good guide to use. You know how the rest of the world's drafting. And of course, you're going to have to make it specific for your draft room, like I said, because everyone drafts differently, right? Depending on who's their favorite team, who's their favorite players. Do they like running backs more? Do they like wide receivers more? So know who the guys are in your draft, 10, 12, 8, however many people you have there. Use this as a guide to see who's going where, who's slipping. And you'll be ready for draft day. So this was definitely very interesting. Should this change a lot? I definitely will talk about it again. But one of the more interesting things I wanted to say is that no rookies in this top 50 here. No rookies being selected, for one of those RB2 positions. I think if you give me a guy like David Johnson, or you tell me, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I might put Clyde Edwards-Helaire up there. I think there's a ton of upside with a kid like that. And so very, very interesting stuff. Maybe I'll take a look. Maybe next time we'll take a look at where the rookies have landed here, and then talk about that. But with that, guys, excuse me, we're gonna take a short break. We're running out of time here, so we'll take a short break. We'll be right back. Talk about a mock draft I recently did, and then of course keep the show rolling. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Back to the show. As I mentioned right before the break, I recently did a mock draft just to, kind of test out where people, how closely people picked to the ESPN Live Draft Trends. Of course, those are the averages, but it's not 100% accurate, right? So I wanted to do a mock draft, excuse me, just to test it out. And I'll keep doing these, of course, and I encourage all of you guys to do mock drafts. Of course, you don't get to keep the team or anything. It doesn't mean anything. The league gets deleted when the draft is done. But it helps you adapt to the way different people pick. I would suggest, you keep record of the, what teams you ended up with. How'd you pick the same? How'd you pick differently? Because that personally helps me when draft day comes around. And not to toot my own horn, but I'm a player who is constantly in playoffs. Constantly making a run at the championship. So, I figured sharing some tips with you guys might help you guys do the same. So, I picked my own slot, because when you go into these mock drafts, you can actually pick your own slot. I picked a 10-team mock draft. I believe that they're based on cities, in which the person who created it is located. I think this was it was called a Detroit, 10-team Detroit PPR draft. You'll see when you go look at mock drafts, a lot of them say, however many teams are there, and it'll say a city, Kansas City, 10-team, Philadelphia, 12-team, mock draft, whatever, so and so, and it'll say the scoring format. This was a 10-team just because I prefer 10-team leagues. I think 12 is a little bit much. it's not horrible, but I like to have, I think when you have 10 teams, it's a bit more competitive because, you get more choices on the waiver wire, and you're not exactly just caught in the gutter when a player goes down with injuries, et cetera, et cetera. So I like 10 teams. I'll keep saying it forever to make sure you guys know. But yeah, so this was a 10-team mock draft. I picked slot number 5 because you can pick what order you go in so long as nobody else has a slot. Just because I wanted to see what people were doing with the early and later picks in the rounds and see what I can get with that middle of the round spot. I know it's not the best spot. A lot of people don't like it, but here's how it went. So in this draft, as probably it will go in many drafts, Christian McCaffrey went first. And of course, I don't remember every single pick and where they went, but I just, took some mental notes on things I noticed. Michael Thomas did not go second in this draft. I think that will be fairly common on draft day. Saquon Barkley actually went second. Michael Thomas went third. Honestly, the pick before me was a bit absurd. The guy picked Devontae Adams at number 4. And I got Ezekiel Elliott with pick number 5, which I really liked there. With my second round pick, I believe, I'm trying to remember here what my second round pick was. I believe that would have been pick 15. Pick 15, I ended up getting Austin Eckler. So he did slip pretty far down there. We did talk about him earlier that his average draft position was around 19 or 20. He slipped very far. So my first 2 picks were 2 running backs ranked in the top 5 of last year's fantasy football season. So I was very, very happy about that. I went very running back heavy in this draft here just because I couldn't ignore the value and talent of the guys there. In the third round, Kenyon Drake was still available on the board. I believe there was another wide receiver that was there that I could have taken. I took Kenyon Drake to run in my flex. So my 3 top picks were Ezekiel Elliott, Austin Eckler, and Kenyon Drake. I was very, very happy with those picks. The round after, I took my first wide receiver, and that was Allen Robinson of the Bears. He was a top 10 guy last season. I was very satisfied with that pick. In the 5th round, I believe this is when I chose Deshaun Watson. So at this point, I had Deshaun Watson, Ezekiel Elliott, Austin Eckler, Allen Robinson, and Kenyon Drake. So I really, really like that. Yes, the wide receivers are weak. Yes, this is PPR. But Allen Robinson's the top wide receiver on the Bears. He was a top 10 fantasy wide receiver last season. So I'll definitely take it. The second wide receiver I ended up choosing in the 6th round was DJ Chark Jr. Top 20 guy. I believe he finished in the top 18. I think he was 18th or 17th overall in fantasy points last season. Picked him because there were some other guys here. I believe Terry McLaurin was there. Jarvis Landry was on the board here. But I chose DJ Chark because he has a good relationship with Gardner Minshew, on the field at least. And he's a clear number 1 in Jacksonville. And if you're number 1, you're going to be getting a lot of targets and a lot of points in PPR. Now, I couldn't tell you, I wasn't really focused on getting bench players just because I wanted to see, what was the optimal starting lineup I could end up with. So I do remember I picked a defense earlier than I usually would have, but I picked up, after selecting DJ Chark, I believe that was the 6th or 7th round, kind of losing track here. I got Evan Ingram as my tight end, which I was very satisfied with. I believe who was on the board there. There was a solid tight end just 2 picks before me that slipped pretty far that someone scooped up right before I was able to select. But I got Evan Ingram. Definitely fine with that. He has a chance to be one of the top tight ends in fantasy football next season as well. For my defense, I ended up with the Baltimore Ravens. Very satisfied with that pick. And my kicker, which I picked in the last round, was Matt Gay, who was very, very good for the Buccaneers last season, was a top 5 fantasy football kicker. I was 3 picks away from getting Harrison Butker. But Justin Tucker, Harrison Butker, and Will Lutz went bang, bang, bang. 3 picks in a row right before me. And I got Matt Gay, who I think in that high-powered offense will do just fine. Now, I want to talk about my bench because not that, I remember the exact rounds that I drafted these guys in, but I ended up with some solid guys, and I went with younger guys who I believe could potentially break out. Of course, I'd be picking differently come, the real draft when there's risk involved, and, I do money leagues myself, so, when money's involved, you try to be as safe as possible. But I ended up with DeAndre Swift as my first backup running back, Marquise Brown, Aaron Rodgers as my backup quarterback, CeeDee Lamb, Mecole Hardman, Dallas Goedert, and I picked up J.K. Dobbins just to stash him and see if maybe he can turn into something crazy in Baltimore. And I'm very, very satisfied with this draft, if I'm going to be honest here. Marquise Brown, I know he didn't have a huge year last season, but I expect Lamar Jackson to be asked to pass the ball a lot more, and I think Marquise Brown now at full health is definitely going to be heavily featured in that passing attack. Especially with, we'll see something like how Ryan Tannehill's just bombing the wide open guys. I expect that from Lamar Jackson next season. They're going to be running the ball a lot, using the play action. I think, with him working on passing a lot more, we'll see way more play action, deep bombs to Marquise Brown with the threat of the run. Aaron Rodgers as my backup, I'll definitely take that. Not saying that, he's going to be, fantasy's number one quarterback, but he's definitely a solid option to be a backup. Probably only Deshaun Watson should have a great year, so he'll probably only be in for Houston's bye week. But should something happen to Deshaun, I'm very happy to have Aaron Rodgers as the backup. I usually draft a second quarterback. I know some people may not do that, but having two solid quarterbacks definitely can help you from week to week. If you have one guy's facing a really tough matchup, maybe he's been struggling recently, flipping your quarterback can make the difference between winning and losing a season. So it's something that I do pretty regularly. I get two very solid quarterbacks that can help me win my league. One season, when Patrick Mahomes had his first season as a starter, I had him and Aaron Rodgers. Both had amazing seasons, and it was very, very useful. Mecole Hardman, Dallas Goedert. These are guys who aren't number ones, but these are guys who can produce in fantasy. Dallas Goedert was a top 10 fantasy football tight end as a backup to Zach Ertz, and so I took that opportunity to snag him. He's my backup tight end. I think he's going to slowly be more and more featured in the offense because he's the heir apparent to Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz is only getting older. He had some struggles with some injuries last season, so that only gets worse as you get older. CeeDee Lamb, of course, we don't know what he's going to do, but if Dallas's offense is as prolific as it was last season, I think CeeDee Lamb could put up some big numbers as well. And just to talk about DeAndre Swift, guys, I definitely think that DeAndre Swift has a lot of potential. A lot of people keep talking about the Lions having a running back by committee. Sure, they might start that way, but I think DeAndre Swift is talented enough to take this, take the starting position and be that every down workhorse in Detroit. So overall, there were some surprises definitely in the draft. One of them being Lamar Jackson was taken with the first pick in the second round. Not a surprise when you compare it to the live draft trends, but it was surprising to see someone actually do it. Just because, to see quarterbacks go that early is surprising. One other surprise, though, was that Patrick Mahomes actually slipped into the third round. I was thinking about taking him there, but he was scooped up before I had the chance to take him. It's funny talking about, a quarterback slipping to the third round, but nowadays, when you see Lamar Jackson in the first or second round, Mahomes going to the third is a slip, so definitely some very interesting things. So saw a lot of people, wait way too long on guys. So a lot of people take guys way too early. A lot of rookies were flying off the board early. I remember a guy selecting Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the third round. So, definitely gonna, like I said earlier, pay attention to who you're drafting with, because people are gonna make some pretty shocking decisions. That way you can be best prepared. So overall, I think I had a pretty good draft. Definitely let me know what you guys think. I'll do more and more of these and see how people are drafting so I can give you guys tips on what you should be doing. Anyway, though, guys, we're going to take a short break, and after we come back, we'll go into our last segment and wrap up the show for you guys. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after this short break.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We now enter the final segment of the show today. And guys, it's going to be a little different today. I'm actually going to end the show today with some in other news. Didn't really get to it earlier in the show, but I wanted to talk about some stuff that's been going on in the league. And of course, I'll get back to wishes some other time. Today, what I want to start off with is something that was disappointing because I've talked about it previously on the show, something that I was excited about, something that I thought was pretty cool. The NFL just announced recently that they were going to be canceling all the international games next season. While I understand why they did it, you're going to want to take several, precautions with COVID-19. You don't want to look like you're getting caught, basically lacking or just, caught like the U.S. got caught not preparing, being underprepared, even though you were capable of being prepared prior. It still is disappointing just because, the outreach that the NFL was having, they've played international games, I think, 13, I think it was off the top of my head, 13 seasons in a row, and it's just sort of disappointing to not be able to get that outreach because of, the terrible situation that we are in. I mean, nonetheless, though, it's a smart move. I'm glad to see the NFL doing it, taking every precaution necessary, because what this says to me is, the NFL is not necessarily only worried about, building their audience and making more money in the long run. They want to actually to make more money in the long run. Got to make sure the league starts on time, right? Got to make sure the league season isn't canceled due to COVID-19. So anything that they can do to make sure that we have football next season, I'm going to appreciate. I'm going to like, no matter what. Hey, there's going to be stuff we don't like, but I'm definitely going to take it. And hey, if we ultimately end up in a situation like the NBA, I know a lot of people have been talking about. A lot of fans have voted and said they need the sports. They'd rather have the sports without any fans at the stadiums instead of having to wait for the season to resume with fans in the seats. I'd definitely take that over nothing as well. I think if you told me, hey, the only way the NFL season is starting is if no one is allowed to attend the games, I'm sorry. I love crowd reactions and all that, but give me the sounds of pads hitting people and people catching balls, and give me some more sounds of the trash talk on the field or something. But I definitely need football. So disappointing for sure. We're not going to get that, those international games. I do enjoy them, even though you have to get up super early for the London game. Not super, super early, but super early for football for the London game. And it definitely affects, when you set your lineups for fantasy football. But it's games that I liked and enjoyed, especially, the Mexico games. That was also very cool too. Different region of the world that we're reaching as well. But it is what it is. The show goes on. Another thing I wanted to talk about was very, very interesting. Frank Gore is going to sign a 1-year contract with the New York Jets. This man is ageless. It's absolutely insane that he's still playing. I believe he's number 3 all-time leading rusher. He did that last season. He's probably going into the Hall of Fame. He's absolutely a legend. Can't believe he's still playing. But it's not like he's not going to go, another crazy season and go up number 2 on the list. He's 1,380 yards behind Walter Payton. But I'm not sure I see the use for the New York Jets here. He is going to be reunited with Adam Gase, whom he played for when Frank Gore was on the Dolphins. But I'm not really sure, what the benefit is here. I wouldn't say he's going to have much fantasy value. I can see him being, a goal line guy. He's always been a power guy. Adam Gase actually said he wanted to ease the burden on starting running back Le'Veon Bell, which, I can see that. I don't know why you would do that with a 37-year-old running back, though. But I guess. Yeah. So Frank Gore's 36 right now, but he's going to turn 37, I think, in a week or two. So he's going to be 37 when the league starts. Le'Veon Bell, of course, we know had a horrible season last year by his standards. 789 rushing yards and only 3.2 yards per carry. It was pretty awful. Gase said, I do think we have some guys that can help maybe lessen the load on Bell to where it's not all on him. Hopefully we can get some of the younger backs to where we can make a good 1-2 punch to where we can really excel instead of feeling like it's just all on him all the time. I do like the Jets sort of acknowledging the need to help Le'Veon Bell out, because there was some weird turmoil and drama where, rumors were swirling that Adam Gase didn't even want him. He didn't want to pay a running back that much money and so on and so forth. And then, when the Jets were doing terrible, rumors always start, could he be traded? In his first season there, Adam Gase didn't want him in the first place. Things like that always happen, but I'm glad to see, at least they're trying to get him some help. I spoke about it earlier. They're trying to shore up the offensive line. They did that, with the first round pick, selecting Mekhi Becton. So definitely interesting. Definitely something that I don't think is going to be affecting fantasy football. Of course, Frank Gore is going to get maybe goal line touches. He might steal some touchdowns from Le'Veon Bell. So if anything, Le'Veon Bell might lose a touchdown or two, but not much else than that. I wouldn't say that, this is a guy you're going to need to be targeting in drafts. I highly doubt you guys were targeting him last season regardless, with Devin Singletary on the Bills. But yeah, so that is that. Now, I definitely want to talk about another running back who might be making a return, a guy who's definitely older. Reports have been swirling around that Marshawn Lynch might still come back to the Seattle Seahawks. Lynch has said, well, it's almost on that expect the unexpected when he was asked by Van Pelt about his future. Quote, but just as far as right now, what I do know is I'm going to keep it solid. My agent has been in talks with Seattle, so like I said, we'll see what happens. If it works out and I get back up there, it is what it is, and if not, bleep, I'm looking good, so I ain't really tripping too much. Well, that's as Marshawn Lynch as it gets, always keeping it real, always keeping it 100. I definitely appreciate that. But I think this was, when Marshawn Lynch came back to the Seahawks, there was a lot of hype around it. It was definitely nostalgic, definitely nice to see him in the uniform again, see the Skittles raining and all that. But he really didn't produce much. And, I don't know if it was the line's fault, Marshawn Lynch is washed, whatever. Either way, he wasn't relevant, probably not going to be relevant in fantasy football should he even return. I think he would form, a 1-2 punch of sorts. Sort of like how the Jets are saying they're going to have a 1-2 punch. Marshawn Lynch could help ease the load on Chris Carson, who has, they were just marred by injuries in that running back room. Could help ease the load on a guy like Chris Carson, who, he's a power kind of guy. I think, they should not bring him back to, be the top dog. Doesn't really make sense. He was very, very rusty. But, it'd be cool. It would definitely be cool to see. I love Marshawn Lynch as a character, love what he stands for. He's definitely a guy who I believe, if you guys haven't seen his documentary, I'm actually blanking on what the title is, but he has a documentary. It was on Amazon Prime Video. It's very, very interesting. He's a guy, he's so straight up, so true, so raw. I really appreciate, the kind of person that he is before, the player that he is. Also loved his running style, just running through people, running into contact, and then, coming off the field, being a true, just true spoken guy, always sticking to his word, never switching up. Definitely have to appreciate that when it comes to a player. Wasn't a diva. He just always kept it real, told you how it is. And I know a lot of people didn't like him for the antics with the media, but he had good reason for it. He didn't want the media twisting his words. He didn't want to be caught up in, scandals because of the media, things like that. And, at the end of the day, that goal line touch, we're always going to remember it, should have been given to him. And actually in the documentary, they talk about it, and he mentions that Marshawn Lynch, he mentions that he wasn't the ideal sort of figure for the franchise, right? They didn't want Marshawn to be the face of the Seattle franchise. So he mentions that the reason that he was not given the ball against the Patriots in that Super Bowl was because they wanted Russell Wilson to be the star. They wanted Russell Wilson to be MVP in the face of that franchise. So it's a very interesting take. We all have heard the stories. We all know what has happened in the aftermath of that Super Bowl, but it's very, very interesting to hear Marshawn speak on it and sort of give you his own theory, which honestly isn't that far-fetched when you watch the documentary. So very, very interesting stuff, guys. But with that, I'm going to leave you here and end the episode. I want to thank you all for listening, guys. I just want to ask that you give us a great review. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you all stay safe. Hope you all stay sane. And we'll see you here next time, guys. I'm your host, Marcus Vargas, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.